when was the last time we spoke? I think it was like mid last year. Early.
Yeah, I think so. It was, I think before the whole crypto and AI intersection really went pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think a lot has changed since then. It's been like over a year.
Yeah, I think when we spoke, it was what? GPT-3.
Perhaps maybe 3.5.
3.5.
Yeah.
No real good video models back then. I think coding was okay back then. And then on the crypto side, I think there was a lot of like the deep in things, right? We hadn't had that AI agent wave come on as well. So it's been, yeah, crazy how just 1 year makes things feel very different. So today I think I want to go from like two different ends, right? And we somehow kind of meet in the middle. So I want to go from like the AI side, where are the developments or like what's been happening, like the overall trend, and then we talk about like open networks, where does crypto or cryptography make sense, and then we can go from the other side, just like from a crypto perspective, like what we're seeing within our ecosystem, right? Like with DeFi and so on, and where do the agents there make sense, like tokenization, and how do we make use of like the whole AI developments. And then we'll kind of see where we land in the middle and then go down some rabbit holes from there. So yeah, let's go. Overall AI, I mean, obviously exponential progress. And I think now the markets are also starting to price in what now stock markets are talking about AI optimism, right? That everything's gonna benefit from this wave. I think today, among the few presentations, one of the key focus areas is about openness in AI, or truly open AI, right? So what are your thoughts on the rapid development? Are we also making progress in open AI, open source AI, open data, open compute? And is that important? Have you been looking into this sector?
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty broad question, but I think like stepping back a little bit, right? A lot of like what has happened in AI over these last like 2 or 3 years has been driven a lot by the scaling laws, right? People believe that the more compute, the more data that you feed into a model, the smarter it's going to get. And we've seen some of that. We've seen all these like emergent capabilities that have came up. Like when we were talking last time, it was GPT 3.5. I think GPT 4 was very much the very big like leap where suddenly you could do a lot of things that really surprised a lot of us, and that triggered the whole AI agent sort of meta.
Reasoning. There was no reasoning back then.
Yeah, reasoning, correct. There was no chain of thought, over back then. I think what we've seen over this year is that there has been steady linear progress in terms of how the AI models are improving, the capabilities of these things. We haven't yet seen that next jump, that next emergent capability that suddenly it could do something that we never thought it was able to do. I think this year a lot of the progress has been in coding, has been in video generation models, as you have said, and the big tech companies, the AI labs, especially with like what OpenAI announced over the last week or so in terms of like very heavy investments from NVIDIA and Oracle, they are still building up the infrastructure, right? And everyone believes that if we scale the infrastructure, we scale the compute, at some point in time, we're going to get the next step up in terms of like capabilities. But we haven't seen that yet, right? And no one knows when that's going to be coming because that's the nature of what emergence sort of like mean. In terms of like openness of all this, right? I think one thing that really surprised me this year, and which I actually didn't anticipate, was the availability of a lot of these like open source AI models. A year back, it was mostly just Llama 3, right? Everyone was just using Llama 3 if you wanted to do something open source. But this year, we've seen at least 3 or 4 of these like very big like open source models. They are very good in capabilities. I would say they are probably like say 90% of the performance of say the top tier frontier models like Claude and GPT-5. But at a much cheaper cost. So I think that's a very good trend. That's a very interesting trend that has come up because I think openness is very important. Right? If you think about like who is able to build or create these AI models today, it's very concentrated into the hands of a few different organizations and companies that actually have the resources, have the talent pool to be able to build this. Right? The OpenAIs, the Anthropics of the world, Amazon, Google. Like I can probably name it on like just 2 hands or so. The idea of openness, not just open weights, but being able to understand how these models are developed and built, I think is very important. And I think that's where probably Web3 and crypto actually does play a part in some of this.
So before we go there, so actually, yeah, like you said, it's been surprising progress, right? I think even OpenAI finally lived up to their name and released some open source models, long overdue. Why do you think they did that? Like, what made these big labs make that leap? Is it social pressure? Is it some form of governmental thing, or is it like actual gravity, such that like, oh, maybe in order to make the next leg of progress, we need the open source community?
Well, I mean, I don't speak for OpenAI, but I can kind of like hazard a bit of a guess, right? Why organizations like this do a few things. I think the common trend, which we see, is that these big tech companies and research labs keep their frontier models, the most powerful model, for example, GPT-5 in the case of OpenAI, proprietary, right? So it's not open waste. And then they release a model that is a couple of 1 or 2 versions earlier, open source and available. I think 2 reasons, right? One is AI is a very big change in this world today. And I think like every one of us, including myself, is still coming to terms with what its implications on society is going to be in the future. And it's going to be very big, right? People are going to lose their jobs. There's going to be a whole reordering of society. US and China are fighting with each other, almost in a bit of like a war around some of these things. And I think these big labs see releasing some of these like models as open source as a way of building a bit of a brand, right? Helping people to understand, hey, we are not just the bad guys. We're not just trying to commercialize and profit as much as possible from AI, but we also want to contribute. And I think some of them truly believe this as well. There is this underlying philosophy that, especially let's say for a company like OpenAI, their ultimate objective is not to make as much money as possible. Their ultimate objective is get to AGI, right? And to get to that super intelligence, it's probably not going to come from a single lab. It's going to come from the innovation and intelligence of the entire human population together. And so by releasing some of these openly, hopefully it helps to spur innovation. It helps other people to experiment, build things. And as a human society and race, we get to that. So that's my kind of like sort of like semi-altruistic view of why they might be doing some of these things.
Yeah, I guess a slightly more skeptical view is that ironically also driven by pressures from DeepSeek, which surprisingly then the Chinese guys are really going for open source. In order to counter, well, maybe as like a fast follower principle, right? And it's very much like the West kind of owns the IP, and then the East owns like the whole manufacturing base. So you just want to make it as open as possible, so that you can produce it with as low cost as possible for it to proliferate. And then now people realize that, hey, maybe actually that's the way to go, right? We don't want to all pay for this open AI API for every single application in our whole lives. We want to host stuff on our phones. If you're an enterprise, you want to have control over how you interact with these models as well, and then maybe periodically upgrade to the latest ones. And for the cutting edge, like, okay, maybe some of the researchers or your sandbox innovation or retail applications that they don't care can still run on like the frontier that's hosted.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true. Like, if you look at the frontier models, they're just so expensive. And I think like probably like 90% of the things we do with AI, it can be done almost just as well with a much cheaper model. And I'm hearing that like a lot of companies and startups in the US are not even using like these big models. They're using these open source models from China, right? Because as a startup, you have that sort of like leeway to work with these things. Whereas like for the Fortune 500 companies, like it's going to be difficult because of regulatory, because of perceptive things. You can't use these very good China open source models. But I'm hearing a lot of startups and companies using these open source models as their base sort of like model.
Yep, super encouraging. So now let's go to the crypto side of things, right? So with these, well, with hopefully all of AI going towards more open, what are your thoughts then on like the adoption of decentralized networks, right? Because I think if you look across the stack, theoretically speaking, we can then crowdsource or decentralize the compute, the data, and then even the applications that are all across the whole stack, right? But then I think we start to see some examples. Like last year when we were speaking about BitTensor was making a lot of progress. I think it's still some applications are going well there. We just heard from IONET as well, from the compute side. We just had Zero G launch as well, which talked about black box AI. And then some part of it also talks about then how do you then have verification, right? Either of these models. So we have Flock. I know you wrote some research on that as well. But these feel like emerging. Hopefully it's not afterthought. But I think hopefully it's more like an emergent need as we use more of AI in our everyday lives. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think like everything I've seen happen in the crypto and AI intersection over this 2 years or so that I've been deeply exploring the space, I think it's pretty clear to me that one, there isn't a clear product market fit yet, like with crypto and AI. And it doesn't necessarily need to be there because ultimately a lot of what we do with blockchain is very infrastructure focused, right? We're building the infrastructure layer. And I think two main things that crypto and blockchain really adds and lends to AI is really around the ability for things to be permissionless and also the ability for things to be privacy preserving. And right now, today, with AI, I would say that it's very much a land grab, right? Everyone right now, every company, every startup is trying to build an application to disrupt some of the big giants that are out there. And today, nobody really cares so much about privacy. No one really cares so much about being able to access compute without KYC. Today, right? And that's the situation today. Everyone's trying to build the next billion-dollar, trillion-dollar sort of application and stack out there. Why I think it's very interesting and why is to spend a huge amount of time on crypto and AI is because I see this as an opportunity for crypto and blockchain to actually place itself within this entire AI stack. Because AI is evolving and developing so rapidly, these LLMs only came about in these last couple of years. It means that if we create something of value, there's actually a chance where some of these infrastructure and protocols that are being built today can sort of immerse itself and be part of the standard stack where people build AI applications in the future on. The crypto and AI intersection, it's only been usually probably about 2 to 3 years. Many of the startups and companies that have been building in the space, they started in the 2023 if they were early, 2024 if they were a little bit late. So it's been only a very short period of time where they actually have been building right now. And I think sometimes we tend to get caught up in this very sort of short-term vision, and we try to say, hey, a lot of people kind of view the things right now in crypto and AI as very much vaporware. Nothing has come out of it. It's all speculation. It's all about token prices. But I think if we fast forward down 5, 6, 7, 10 years later, we're going to see how a lot of the things that we started building today, decentralized compute, decentralized training networks, these are going to be very fundamental core pieces of what AI is going to be built on in the future, and that is what keeps me very excited.
That's why we're all here. And if I can draw a parallel to crypto adoption as well, right? Because I think the early days of crypto as well, it's we had all these dreams, but to be honest, what people really used it for is to evade, governmental, either it's sanctions or illicit activities, especially in the early days, right? And I think the parallel here to AI is where if you can't get access to the compute, let's say the chips that you want to import or use are not allowed to be imported to your country, then you could access that via a decentralized network. Or you just happen to be part of a background or part of an industry that's disfavored. You can then utilize these decentralized networks. I heard at least some of the networks are actually benefiting a lot from that. I guess the other part is uncensored or unaligned models, so to speak, right? So that you don't have to be politically correct all the time. You don't have to block certain political topics, which perhaps I do wonder what is then the implication on the actual content or productivity or reasoning capabilities, right? Maybe arguably there's none, but arguably for some of the important or I guess certain interest groups, it's much more important. So I guess for now, at least we have this niche that we occupy until we hit some sort of stable coin moment equivalent for crypto AI infra. But then, shall we go to the other angle now? Flip all over to the other side. So crypto has made a lot of progress as well, right? I think since well, since I think this cycle in general, DeFi as a whole has just gotten so much more mature, just because regulatory acceptance, stablecoin, like circle listing, and now all the institutions are like launching their own chains. Everybody's trying to launch their own stablecoin. Institutions starting to want to use DeFi. We have like prediction markets coming mainstream. And well, starting with the Trump election, which was then late last year. Wow, it's only been less than a year. and now like all sorts of topics are being betted on with prediction markets. And increasingly now, and then we had this whole AI-fi wave, right? So now increasingly there's a view that actually crypto needs AI to simplify a lot of the user interactions. And also to automate a lot of the actions that were manually being pushed or were just like being run on a server. Curious, like, what are your thoughts on this? And based on what you're seeing, we just had quite a few talks. Of course, like Virgil's talks about a lot of the AI agents. Theoric also talking about the finance agents, and these are focused on like the crypto native use cases. So these are the types that like the AI guys don't care, but in crypto we're like, oh shit, actually we need this.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think like if we think about the crypto native use cases of AI, I think it comes down to a lot of like what is crypto being used for today, and a lot of it is like you said, DeFi, value transfer, asset transfer, trading, and I think it's interesting to see. I think the problem statement is very clear. That basically, can we have, for example, can we build an AI agent that helps us to trade, help us to find the best use? Can we build an AI agent that helps us to make sense of a lot of very messy, unstructured on-chain data? Can we build an AI agent that helps us research things because it's very messy space, information is very fragmented around the area. So I think the problem statement is very clear, and over this past year, I've seen like many startups attempt to try this problem statement. I'm sure you've seen like many of these sort of like chat GPTs for cryptos, they're out there. I think a few thoughts come to my mind. One is definitely the user interface of crypto is, we all know, like, it's just very, it's just very difficult to use if you're someone that's just sort of like getting to learn and getting to know in the space. I still remember back in the DeFi summer days, like, when you make a transaction on Uniswap, like, you don't know if you're interacting with a scam contract and all of these different things, right? So you can imagine that for someone who's trying to understand, trying to get into crypto today, I think it's really difficult for them to make sense of this. And hopefully AI, some of these tools in AI can actually help to reduce that barrier of entry for people to do it. I think it's a little bit of there's a bit of a chicken and egg problem with this as well, where with AI itself is also never 100%, right? There is that risk of hallucinations. Like even today, like we can do things like let's say we can do something well at 99% of the time, right? There's still that 1% chance that something goes wrong. And when you're dealing with like crypto, where a lot of the transactions are not just like a chat or sharing a video, but it does involve like transfer of assets and money, that means there can be very much real financial loss out there. And I think like many of these products and applications that are building to help improve the user experience of crypto, I think it's going to take them a little bit of time to earn, firstly, to get to the level of reliability that people are willing to trust them with money. Like even today, I would say that I still find it very difficult to put any significant amount of money, like with, say, an AI agent protocol or an AI agent sort of application today, because I still worry. I want like 2 or 3 years of people battle testing all of this, just like how we did that with DeFi over the last couple of years with many of these protocols at Aave, and now we have a very strong degree of trust in this. But I think the same things will happen with some of these. Like it just takes time to build some really good things.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, to be honest, that was one of the very big pain point for Virtual's protocol ACP. So there's the agent commerce protocol where agents would then ask other agents to accomplish a certain task, right, and you validate that on chain. So the whole idea is that because agents can hallucinate, let's put this interaction on chain so that they cannot lie, right? First, like, hey, here's a job, and here's a criteria to prove that the job is done. And then the other agent can say, here's a proof the job is done, and then the funds are released. But then what we found is that a lot of the time, actually significant part of the time, the agent that's supposed to finish the job sometimes will just say, because it's trying to be as efficient as possible, I guess, with computer or something, it'll be like, oh yeah, job's done. But then the job's not done. And then, or then there's some reliability uptime and so on. So a lot of bugs had to be fixed. I think then we start to then have like different agents that can check whether jobs are done. You have the eval agents, and you have the audit agents to make sure that they are safe. That's also the same approach that Theoric, the earlier speaker, was talking about, where you need a swarm, right? Where like, let's break down the task, and then once you do the task, there's another agent that checks, and then finally there's an overall agent that perhaps checks that the overall deliverable is put together and accomplished to the user's needs. So yeah, indeed, it feels like we're at the stage where we're figuring things out, but then I guess that's where the alpha is. No, we're early to the game, and it's quite obvious where we're going to, right? I mean, today, or rather just last week, Virtuals launched the Butler on X. Do you see that one?
Which one? Sorry.
So Jensen was speaking earlier about Butler agent. So
Okay.
so we go to X and Butler underscore agent, and then if you see like a token that you want to buy or a token you want to do research on, you can say like, hey Butler, is smart money actually buying this token, or like this token is smart money. Actually, what has happened recently, and then it will actually charge your wallet for, let's say, an info thing, or to go accomplish a transaction, or to generate some media, and then it's purely on X, right? And as long as the wallet has a balance that you top it up, it would just do it for you, but through a public interaction or with a DM on X. So I mean, I would love for on-chain interactions to be as easy as that, right? Compared to opening up wallets, browser extensions, and yeah, in a way, it also feels like kind of scary sometimes to interact with new things. Whereas like if I know there is an intermediary sort of butler or registry that actually checks these different contracts and make sure that they're safe, then I don't have to worry about checking it myself, right? And I would imagine a lot of consumer or retail use cases are like that too.
Like in crypto, we build a lot of things that we call like trustless like things, right? But ultimately, a lot of it comes down to trust. For example, like as you give that example, right, around the Butler agent, like it comes down to you trusting that the Virtuals team has built this in the right way, that the code is it's not going to do anything malicious that's out there. Because like most of us, we can't read the code, right? We can't tell like exactly what it's doing. So it's funny because I think a lot of good products, a lot of great products start that way. They start with there is still some degree of centralization, there's some degree of trust that's required, and over time, as they improve the product, as they improve the protocol, as they go through various like ups and downs, like people, because crypto is very adversarial, right? People are always trying to stress test it, trying to exploit it. Also, over time, we get to the really like hardened, battle hardened products. But I think every product needs to start that way. I think any product that immediately goes down the 100% like decentralization route and says that this is the most important thing, I feel like sometimes it can be a little bit of a very heavy slog to get to where you need to kind of be.
All right. I think we have about 10 minutes more. So I have a whole bunch of questions about like your current research areas and future stuff, but in case anybody has any questions, we can start to slot it in here. Any questions from that they want to slot in? Otherwise, I'm gonna continue. Okay, continue. Any current research areas that you're most interested about? I think right now, in the last like 1-2 months, embodied AI has just become the most hyped up term. Everyone wants to talk about robots, and then eventually like autonomous robotic AI, right? Embodied AI. Are you looking into this? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. I think everyone sees the opportunity, right? And today you can count like how many humanoid robots are there in the world, right? It's a very small number that's out there. But in 10 years' time, I think it's not difficult to imagine there are going to be millions of these like humanoid robots either working in the factories, working at home today. So this is a new, likely multi-trillion-dollar market that is going to materialize in the next whatever your optimism in terms of like robotics really being able to solve the problems that it has today. So the question in everyone's mind right now is really how do we capture the opportunity around these things, right? People say, you buy Tesla stock, buy Amazon stock, because these are the two big companies that will likely solve these problems out there. But I think it's very interesting also to see like how people are trying to figure out how to solve some of these problems within the space. And I think the biggest problem within this embodied AI space, at least on the software side, is really around data collection, right? Data. If you look at the large language models that have been trained today, it's been trained on like trillions of tokens that are out there. And we had the entire internet, like 20, 30 years of all of that information and data that's out there. Whereas like for robots and embodied AI, I think there is very little, probably at least like 3 to 4 magnitudes less data is out there. So the question is that how do we get to that data? Because we know that we need probably a certain amount of data, a certain threshold. We don't know what the threshold is, but once we cross that threshold, we probably get robots that are useful enough for us to have at home today. Yeah, so I think it's very interesting. I've been looking at a couple of like Web3 companies, startups that are building things around this. A lot of it revolves around like using incentives to aggregate data to get people to do things like teleoperating robots. They're out there and so collect the data along the way. I think one company that was interesting was like OpenMind, which is doing something a little bit different. They are doing more of the governance side of robots.
You're not doing data though.
Yeah, they're not doing so much data. It's more of like believing that, what happens if you have a robot that's out there and it decides to go rogue and it decides to start, spending your money or just whacking people out there, which, is not what we want to have with a robot out there. Yeah. And blockchain does provide some of that guardrails, hopefully, in terms of making these safe.
Yeah, I think identity, skills marketplace. On the data teleoperation one, from Virtuals Ventures, we actually invested in Prisma X. So the co-founder, Bailey from MIT Labs, he's spoken to a lot of the robotic researchers. And actually, I've validated this with a few other researchers. The consensus, yes, there's a huge data bottleneck, and we need about 1 billion hours of data to have at least the first working robotic foundational model. And well, he from what he says, what he can see among the data buyers, they're looking for teleoperation data right now. But I think longer term, there's also a lot of talk about collecting first-person view data, like egocentric data, just to build, let's say, a world model. So we shall see. I mean, Jan LeCun talks about how, hey, LLMs are dead end, go for JPA and world models now. And maybe then if it's a totally new area that does need totally different data sets, and then crypto incentives can play a big role. Because before these models are built and monetized, it's very hard to put a dollar value to the data set that you are collecting, right? And then so having a token to just represent that you contributed or attributing your contribution helps a lot in let's say when you eventually monetize and you can actually flow it back to the people or the group or the specific episode of data that was included in the training and improve the performance. So indeed, preparing for the future.
Yeah, I think 100%. I think ultimately, collecting data has a cost, right? And it's something what I call data acquisition cost. And robotics data particularly is very expensive, especially real-world robotics data, because you actually you need something physical, you need something actually doing things out there, and it costs time and effort to do it. And using a token, to me, is also a little bit of a bit of an IOU, right? In the sense that you can have people who believe in the value of the future value of the data, and by using a token to represent that ownership of the data or that contribution of the data, you can actually reduce the acquisition cost of that data significantly. And I think it's very interesting. I'm actually very curious to fast forward, say 1 or 2 years later, and see how some of these companies like Prisma X kind of play out, how much data they are able to sort of really aggregate using some of these incentive models. And it's a big experiment in play, so we're going to see how it works out.
Future value. Again, right? I feel that all the stuff that we talked about today, is all future value. Robotics, okay, data for future value. Crypto AI, okay, not reliable enough, but future value. And then open source, verifiable, also future value, right? As it becomes more important. And basically, are we just too early? Okay, what's practical today? What's actually useful today, you think?
It's a tough question. I honestly, I would say that in crypto, we are always too early to things, right? Stable coins came up in 2017, 2018. We had NFTs. We had the metaverse come up in 2020, 2021. I'm 100% sure NFTs, metaverse is going to be a thing. But I think we're probably just maybe 5 to 8 years too early on this. So maybe the same is kind of happening to here. We are seeing the opportunities. We're seeing what's going on. But it's going to take a while for some of these things to really get to sort of real value. I think the one area that definitely I would say has immediate direct interest is maybe this previous speaker from IONET just mentioned, I think a decentralized compute is real. There is a very huge demand for compute, as you say, also in certain pockets where they're not able to access the traditional compute. And so some of these protocols are generating 7, 8 figures or even 9 figures in terms of revenue, right? So I think that's one part which is quite clear. Part of me also sees the value of blockchain and crypto beyond just compute, because compute is just very base layer, foundational kind of infrastructure. The area which I think is interesting and following with quite keen interest is around the decentralized training of AI models. I think some of these teams are tackling a very to me, it's a bit like a moonshot. I think like there are just so many technical challenges and hurdles to get decentralized training correct. But these teams are just constantly going at it, and hopefully over time, some of the progress among these different teams like add up and compound to each other. That we actually solve the problem and actually find a certain niche to be able to train models in a decentralized way, and have everyone who contributes to training these models, either whether you provide your compute from your gaming laptop at home or you provide your data, unique data set that you might have, you also get a share of ownership of this model that you have, and it's not just owned by a single entity. So I think it's very interesting. I think I would say that most of these models are not useful right now. They are still like too nascent compared to the big models, but it's something I'm looking at. And then I think like the area which is probably the most direct and real is really around in the application space, right? We have AI models that are able to do a lot of very cool stuff. I think today the opportunity is in vertical AI applications. Can you build an AI application? Can you build an AI agent that does accounting work for you? Does research work for you? Works as a legal counsel for you, right? I think that's the area that is. And if we can use, I don't know, like network effects, crypto incentives to help to build some of these applications that actually provide direct value to people, I think that's going to be very powerful, and that's probably the immediate opportunity that's out there, like that can be realized in the next couple of months. I think what has amazed me with AI is that we've seen some of these like startups like Cursors of the world that have gone like from zero to like hundreds of millions of annual recurring revenue, like in just a very short period of span, right? Like
apparently they're subsidizing a lot of the, the compute, and so therefore it's cheaper to just go through them.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's a bit like the Uber and the Grab days, right? Where you're just giving out like free vouchers and all of that, which is great for the consumer, but yeah.
Yeah, well, at least useful, right? Like it's like, a lot of the coding productivity is just going there, and a lot of the junior analysts, junior coders are getting phased out. So yeah, everybody needs to keep up.
I'm actually curious what you see are the big opportunities like in crypto, because I think you have a very different perspective as well, like talking with a lot of like different builders and people in the space. Like, is there a very specific thing like within like crypto and AI that you find like very exciting?
Yeah, for sure. I think from both the angles we discussed just now, right? From where does AI meet crypto? I think the initial immediate thing is what are some things that AI people cannot get? Right, so one is like the uncensored stuff. So like exactly as we talked about, compute and then uncensored models, and then also new data sets. Because you can go ahead and like scrape everything that's on the internet, but you can't scrape like first-person view data to build a new robotics model. And you can, of course, buy up a whole factory to then collect the data from all the factory workers, but they're all with the same environment. So if you want like data diversity, it comes from everywhere, then having like crowdsourced model helps a lot. And also, like I said, if you don't know the value of what you're crowdsourcing, it's much easier to attribute it on chain or with a token, and then like figure it out later. So I think from immediate perspective, I think those are already generating revenue. So uncensored models already generating revenue, decentralized compute already generating revenue, decentralized data collection already generating revenue, and we're talking about like 7-8 figures contracts, right? So annualized, it can become like 8-9 figures contracts, and the large labs are buying, are just like paying, and they cannot get enough of all this stuff. From the crypto side of things, I think, to be honest, it's quite a novelty factor of like using DeFi. But I think certain areas you really need AI. So one is like InfoFi. So I mean, crypto Twitter reputation, we all know it, right? Rather than scrolling through everything, you don't know what you don't know. You want to summarize very quickly, and you want to know like what else do I not know. So I think Kaito has done a great job. I've been using Alpha as well. Actually, it's quite helpful. So that I think previously it was possible to follow everything within crypto, just like by following the right people. But nowadays, like crypto has become so large that you need like this summarization like power, and then of course then go into the details yourselves. And then I think in the similar vein, I think like because prediction markets are very close to this information kind of like markets, it makes a lot of sense to both like either create the markets or to potentially resolve the markets as well. Because it's not so much about like for DeFi, it's very specific, right? I want this token, this specific amount with this wallet, this contract, right? With like prediction markets is sometimes it's a lot more like nebulous with the information or like what kind of markets are possible or what kind of markets might be popular. So I think like it kind of stands in between InfoFi and DeFi. And so yeah, actually quite interested in how AI will disrupt prediction markets as well. We're starting to see quite a few teams that are aiming to do that already.
I think that's super interesting. Like, I think the idea for AI to be like create all these like efficiencies that we don't usually see, and be able to like digest information that our human brains are not yet capable of like digesting. I think that's a very powerful tool.
Yeah, at least for LLMs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, hopefully next, hopefully we see like much less hallucination. I mean, OpenAI put out a paper about how if you can during the training process, I forgot whether it's pre-training or post-training, specifically incentivize models to tell you that they don't know something, so that they don't just try to guess the answer. Then the hallucination rate can go down dramatically. Perhaps with that kind of next leg improvement in the base model, then stuff like DeFi is a lot better, right? It won't just like try to imagine out some contract or imagine out some kind of interaction that doesn't exist. Then it can start to be used for mission critical use cases. And then hopefully as different base models, right, like the world models for embodied AI comes out as well, then you can start to use it for actual physical things, construction, manufacturing, where it's again like mission critical, and you can just imagine that an object is there, or imagine or hallucinate an object, or hallucinate the interaction, right? You would predict it with high degree of certainty, and of course have the right safeguards in place. So yeah, quite interested in I think the advancements from the overall AI space in the next couple of years, and I think those will flow incredibly into Web3 as well. I have this thesis around like the 2-cycle thesis. I think okay, let me just wrap up. Sorry. This 2-cycle thesis, right? So exactly like you said, DeFi took 2 cycles to mature, right? First cycle DeFi is basically just hype. And then after all the Ponzi-nomics of yield farming, now we have like real stuff. We haven't yet, we kind of see that a bit with like NFTs, not really gaming, but maybe those are coming soon. Whereas clearly AI and InfoFi and all this AI related stuff, we're in the first cycle of the first hype cycle. So that's why we see all these like agent meme tokens. We see a lot of like hype and speculation driven AI tokens. So actually, as a long-term venture investor, I will be a buyer during the bear market for many of these fundamental teams that continue to build. And I think we will reach maturation in the next cycle in a number of years.
And I agree with you. Like maybe just like one closing comment to that is that a lot of people say that we are in a bubble in AI right now, and maybe it could be if you look at asset prices, some of the fundraisers from some of these startups, they are raising like 9-figure amounts as a seed round. Could seem like a bubble, but I think like we haven't even begun to scratch and fulfill all the productivity gains that will come from these AI models. Right? We're only playing around with like image generation, like video generation, and just chatting with AI. But it's going to be able to do so many more things in the near future. And that's what makes me excited. I totally with you. I think there's going to be a huge. This is definitely not the top. There's going to be a huge ramp up in what's happening in the AI space.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. This is great.
Yes. All right. Thanks, everyone.